Morning and welcome to the third day of the 2021 Unified Wine and Grape Symposium presented by the American Society of Enology and Viticulture and the California Association of Wine Grape Growers. My name is Mike Bohr. I am a Mendocino grape grower and currently work as a PCA and certified crop advisor for Grow West out of Geyserville.
And my name is Leticia Chacon Rodriguez. I'm the winery manager and winemaker at the University of California, Davis. And I'm very happy to be here with you all. This has been a tremendous effort from our program development committee. Mike and I are the co-chairs for the program development committee. And this year we have a tremendous effort to put this in a virtual different format. We thought that was the right way to do it. And I want to take this moment to thank every single member of the Program Development Committee for all their connections, their efforts, their time, their hard work to put this together and make this program success for this year's show.
This year, our committee faced the formidable task of delivering the same invaluable content you expect from a Unified Symposium in a convenient and safe virtual format. We hope you've enjoyed the last 2 days and have learned a thing or two. We worked hard to ensure that we brought you relevant, timely information for your business planning. Today's sessions promise to offer even more ideas for you to take home. We designed our Thursday sessions as a look into the future while still being applicable to today to provide you with tools for success.
So this has been a very challenging year for the Unified and everybody. Obviously, the pandemic, the wildfires, the civic unrest and the protest, those are a few things that have turned our worlds upside down. And obviously, as traumatic as so much of 2020 has been, let's take this time as a pause to really have the opportunity to re-examine the systems and practices we've been using and we have learned from 2020. The events this recent harvest have been especially illuminated the need to incorporate diversity in our core of our business. Building a strong future together starts with foreseeing inclusion across all areas of the wine industry. Today, we will arm you with the tools to create meaningful change in your business. You will be hearing from a panel of speakers on the strategies they have been adapted to build diverse and inclusive brands in this new landscape. Get ready for a highlight focus session that will provide you invaluable lessons to integrate in your business immediately.
Our committee has assembled a panel of experts who will provide you with fresh and powerful insights into how you can evolve your business to match the demands of the post-pandemic world. Please join me in thanking these speakers for volunteering their time and expertise to help us better understand the factors influencing the industry today. Our sponsors also played a critical role in putting this conference on. We would like to thank them for their generous support.
And finally, we'd like to thank you all the audience, everybody, for pushing forward and participating with us amidst everything else that is going on. It was a difficult but ultimately responsible decision to host this event in virtual. And we sincerely thank you all for your transition, for this flexibility and this transition, but very much look forward for next year where we can hopefully do this in person. But in the meantime, let's make the most of this final day of sessions. And I also want to thank all the staff that is behind the scenes. We don't see them, but they are working so hard. CAG and ASCB staffs, I want to thank you guys very much. We couldn't make this without you.
Agreed. Thank you, Leticia. Now, please join us in welcoming this session's moderator, Dorothy Gator.
Thank you, Leticia and Mike, and welcome. You're about to listen to a very thoughtful and and deep discussion. Our topic today is Strength in Diversity, Achieving Meaningful Change for Business Success in the Wine Industry. I am Dorothy Gator. I'm a senior editor at Grape Collective. It's an online magazine and an e-tailer with 2 actual brick and mortar stores in the Northeast. My husband, John Bretcher, and I write a weekly wine column. We've been studying and enjoying wine since 1973. After long careers as award-winning hard news journalists, we created the Wall Street Journal's wine column, Tastings. And that ran from 1998 until 2010. It was nominated once for a Pulitzer Prize. My writing about race relations was nominated twice for Pulitzer Prizes. Last year, our papers were donated to the Warren Winiarski Wine Writers Collection at UC Davis. This general session will go until 10:30, and I want you all to feel free to ask questions. There's a little thing where your chat on your Zoom page that you can ask us questions, and I really hope that you will. We've just emerged staggered, really, from the most horrific year. In 2020, a pandemic began stalking all of mankind. It killed millions, sickened millions more. It upended economies and the way we did business. Simple pleasures were just ended for a while. In that horrific year, the rest of the world began to grasp what the cry Black Lives Matter means. Protests against systemic racism, as Letitia mentioned, swept the country, and it's sweeping cities and countries in Europe as well. So industries wide and far are examining how they do business, how they behave, with the goal, at least the stated goal, of becoming more diverse and more inclusive. So that's why we're here right now, to talk about these things. On this panel, you have Dan. Dan is Dan Vu, and he is the marketing director at Gallows Barefoot Wines, which, as everyone knows, has just been the top-selling table wine brand in the United States for a very long time, as it was last year. Last year, the Barefoot brand wrapped up sales of $673 million. Now, coming in, not even a close second, was Sutter Home with about $397 million in sales. Dan is also director of Barefoot's new diversity and inclusion team, which is charged with attracting Latina, LGBT, and Q. I'm going to screw that up, and I'm asking everyone to forgive me. They're acronyms that escape me sometimes. And Black consumers. He's charged with bringing all of those groups to wine, to Barefoot, and he's been doing a heck of a job at it. Dan has worked for years in marketing, but this is his first job in marketing wine. Before this, and while he's been doing this, he's also put in hours and hours for non-for-profits that help high school sophomores realize their leadership potential, which is really fabulous. That's God's work. Dan is a graduate of Northwestern University's Kellogg School of Management. Next to Dan, we have Carlton McCoy. Carlton McCoy Jr. is CEO and president of Heights Cellar, which made the first vineyard designated Cabernet Sauvignon in Napa Valley. It's iconic Martha's Vineyard Cabernet. Carlton is one of 3 African-American masters of wine in the world, and he sits on the Court of Master Sommeliers Diversity Committee. If you ever doubted whether being decent and hospitable to people who have entrusted you to be decent and hospitable to them, I present Carlton as example A. Now, Carlton used to be wine director at the Little Nell in Aspen. When Arkansas billionaire Galen Lawrence Jr., a longtime guest at the Little Nell, was looking for the right person to guide Heights, which he bought in 2018, he eventually turned to Carlton, whose judgment and character he had come to know and trust. Carlton, who is from Washington, D.C., is also a co-founder of the Roots Fund, an organization that was founded to deal with some of the issues that we're going to be talking about. Teresa Heredia is the only winemaker on this panel, and she has been winemaker at Gary Farrell since 2012. She was an PhD candidate in enology and viticulture at UC Davis when she decided, enough already, I want to make wines. So she left to make wines. Her first job was at Sainsbury in the enology department. And from there, she went to Joseph Phelps, where she worked at the new project there and made its first releases. This was the Freestone Vineyard project. And from there, she went to Burgundy, naturally, right? And after doing that, she brought all of that experience back to Gary Farrell. And Gary Farrell has been really good about her push for diversity and inclusion. She married her wife there in 2016. The San Francisco Chronicle named Teresa a winemaker to watch in 2012. And she was among 5 winemakers that Wine Enthusiast magazine nominated for Winemaker of the Year last year. She's 3rd generation Mexican-American. Now, Vinny, in that red shirt, there you are, Vinny. Vinny was a celebrated general manager and wine director at San Francisco's Tartine Manufactory, and he was one of Food and Wine's Sommeliers of the Year in 2019. He was well known for his wine lists that featured women winemakers and people of color who made the wines, and also an amazing variety of grapes and wine regions. He was born in LA to parents who were refugees from Cambodia's brutal Khmer Rouge regime. In 2012, Vinny's sister, who had been diagnosed with schizophrenia, was shot and killed by police in the waiting room of a mental health clinic in Los Angeles County. That led to Vinny stepping away from wine and for becoming a more active advocate for social justice and for those suffering from mental illnesses. Vinny is a community organizer for San Francisco's New Deal, which is a non-for-profit that works with restaurants to feed people in need while providing income for restaurant workers impacted by COVID-19's lockdown. So we have a lot of experience here and a lot to talk about. So diversity is not a charity. Why should companies have it? How about you, Carlton? Why don't you start? What's so important about having a diverse team?
So, I think it's a really interesting question because I feel for a lot of business owners and those who head up companies, that's been sort of the cynical response we've gotten even through the Roots Fund. And it's sort of like why should that matter to me in my business, which I guess is a really great sort of starting point into the conversation. And I think there's a number of paths you can go down. There's obviously the business approach, but then there's also the emotional and moral approach as well. As far as the business is concerned, we look at the wine industry, and America is still very far from, I think, its peak consumption as far as exposing wine culture to the citizens of this country. And because of the way that we have presented wine in the US, and essentially the way we've also marketed the career paths, it's really excluded a very large percentage of the demographic. People often ask me and they say, well, Carlton, you're a master sommelier and you come from this family, you must have exposed your family to wine. And the answer is no. They still don't feel, just because I am in the industry, that it's a beverage that they can interact with. So as far as the bottom line is concerned, I think it really behooves companies to create diverse teams, especially on the board level and the executive level, to get a different perspective as to how to bring in more of a demographic of the country into wine drinking. Obviously, companies like Gallo have done an incredible job of having diversity as far as price point, style, so forth, and they've always done that, right? They started with the sort of wine cooler industry early on. It's like, how do we just get people warmed up to the idea of wine consumption, but really just sort of giving your company a better purview into what would attract different demographics. And second, especially for the luxury market, is representation. I've been very fortunate to befriend a number of people of color who are heads of industries and big athletes and music professionals and things like that. And one of their biggest complaints is they feel very uncomfortable visiting wine regions where they don't see anyone of color or any diversity, and it just doesn't make them feel like they're welcomed. And that's a big deal. The power of representation. We talk about that often as far as attracting employees and people into the industry, but also for clientele and for guests and consumers. Is it's important for them to see themselves associated with a product, to think that this product is intended, for them. That's the business side. The other side is, what I've found is, even within our companies, is I think it just makes for a better work environment. When we look at, I've had the ability to travel the world, and the more I travel and the more I actually interact with people from around the world, I feel like the better person I become, the more empathetic I become, the more accepting just generally you become. And as we've tried to create a more diverse environment within our companies, you just see people react really differently to having, Black and brown, Asian, more female, all in the workplace. It's a different environment. It's a different feel. And it's really hard to put that into words and what that means. But there is a very different feel in the office in the way people interact with each other. And again, you don't have a protocol for that. And it's hard to really explain how it is, but you just see people reacting to people very differently. And to me, that is probably as important, if not more important.
Now, Dan, Gallo has been doing incredible things. You have employee resource groups for veterans, for disabled people, for Latinas, for African Americans. Talk to us about what your company is doing and how.
Yeah, excuse me, absolutely. And as Carlton said, this is absolutely an imperative for our industry to be able to enhance our diversity. I think that we can all recognize that many people in this country see the wine industry as exclusive. And if you look at the stats, 4 out of every 5 wine drinkers today are white. But at the same time, the growth in this country over the last 10 years, 84% of the growth in this country has come from multicultural folks. So we need the wine industry to look like America today and also America in the future. And I think it's imperative for all of us to make sure that we are welcoming and being inclusive of all people, especially those who may not have always feel included within the wine industry. So for us at Gallo, we are blessed to be in the position we're in and to have a large employee base with our 7 employee resource groups that do represent a lot of different communities out there, a lot of which, as I said before, have been historically overlooked and underserved by the wine industry. And so we're able to leverage those folks to be able to enhance our outreach to consumers. I can give an example for that. I think, as you said, Dorothy, I work on Barefoot. And just last year, we launched our Barefoot Bubbly Pride packages. And if you don't mind, I think bringing up the visual of the Pride packages, that might help sort of bring this to life. But while you do that, I'll say that, we wanted this to be a true celebration of the LGBTQ+ community. And we wanted to sort of highlight some of those historical milestones within the community that really resonated, but maybe weren't as always broadly known. And so we enlisted the help of our LGBTQ+ ERG. And not only did we realize that, hey, look, it's not about a single moment in time, it's actually about many moments. And so we actually did not 1, but actually 4 different Pride Bubbly bottles, each one representing different milestones within the community. So one was around the first Pride Festival, another around gay marriage and equality, another around all the heroes fighting against the AIDS epidemic starting in the 80s and 90s. And then another sort of representing all of the gay men's choruses across the country that have formed to celebrate this community. And look, we couldn't have done this without the help of our LGBTQ+ ERG. We have a passionate group of employees who were able to give input, insight, and at the end of the day, empathy. And the results, I would like to say, speak for themselves. You can see here, we sold out online in less than 24 hours. We restocked and sold out again a couple weeks later. So we were able to do this with the help of our ERGs because they are wonderful resources of people who, quite honestly, it's not part of their day job. You know, they don't have to do this, but they do this because they believe in this and they believe in what we're doing, and they want to help achieve what we all want to achieve, which is more diversity and more inclusion within the wine industry.
Now, you're talking about employees, people you already have. I think a lot of wineries are thinking about how do we get employees of color. This is an amazing thing, and I think I read where for every case of these Pride bottles sold, Gallo donated $1 to free mom hugs and other organizations. That's very awesome looking, and I'm sure very welcome. Teresa, months ago when we first talked to you, John and me, we asked you how your experience as a gay person was when you first got to Napa and Sonoma, and you said that you found the communities welcoming, and as Carlton said, you see very few Black people in Napa and Sonoma. John and I have been going since 1975, and I can't remember ever seeing more than 2 Black people at a time. And I think you said that gay people came up from San Francisco all the time. And so the people in Sonoma and Napa got to know gay people, but there are very few Black people coming there, and that speaks to employees not being there. It speaks to residents as well. How do we change? How do we employ more people of color?
Yeah, it's a challenge from both sides. So coming to Napa and Sonoma, just to address your point there, on the Sonoma County side, we have Guerneville, which is the little gay oasis, you know. So I've spent a lot of time there at the Triple R, and it's just, you know, summertime filled with LGBTQ folks, and so it was always, I felt very welcome here. But my wife is Dominican, you know, she's mixed Black and Latina. And we've always noticed the small number of people of color, Black people in particular. And so that's helped to motivate what I want to do from a small perspective, starting at Gary Farrell and trying to broaden it to Sonoma County. And hopefully that trickles to Napa as well. So the things that we feel we need to do, the things that I see, are trying to address both internal and external initiatives. So internal meaning making changes within our employee group, including improving diversity within our staff, and then broadening that to the external initiatives, which means doing things to bring people of color to Gary Farrell in Sonoma County. I was recently invited to participate in the Sonoma County Vintners brand new diversity committee. We have our first meeting on February 17th. It's huge. That's huge. Sonoma County Vintners is now putting a committee together to try and bring people to Sonoma County. And I think Napa is working on the same thing. So each of us as managers, owners of wineries and vineyards, tourism companies, we all need to work together. We need to have committees everywhere to try and make changes, internal and external. So for example, at Gary Farrell, some things that we're doing, we're looking at hiring potentially a consultant to help us look at the things that we need to change. For example, we need to change the images on our website. If we have people looking at all the websites of wineries around Sonoma County and they don't see people who look like themselves, there's no way for them to know that they're going to feel comfortable there. We are also looking at changing our experiences, but we need some input to try and help us figure out what are the right things to change. Maybe changing our tasting experiences to include flavor pairings that are more broadly cultural, flavor pairings that are not typical in wineries. So rather than simple wine and cheese pairings, maybe we have little bites from, different cultural places. Maybe we feature chefs from local chefs of different cultural backgrounds, different ethnicities, things that just seem welcoming to all different kinds of people. I think it's really important to work together.
tasting room personnel, hiring a diverse tasting room staff would help a great deal too. Now there are all kinds of organizations that are working on education and employment. The Roots Fund, I mentioned that Carlton's working with, Wine Unified. There's scholarships out there, and you don't have to do it all by yourself. You can come together and put together money. There are colleges. Sonoma Community College has programs that are trying to get people into actually growing. And some of them are second generation people whose parents have been working in vineyards. But that doesn't touch Black people that much, and I think for people of my generation, the thought of doing something agricultural, they have associations with slavery, which you have to deal with that stuff. And it's unfortunate, but that's our country's history. If you don't have farmers, you don't have food. It's an important thing. There are historically Black colleges and universities that have pretty robust agricultural programs. People can go to those and recruit just the way they recruit everywhere else. But there are lots of things that can be done. Vinny, do you have some good ideas about the importance of stakeholders and industry leaders being in the room?
Thank you for that question, Dorothy. I think all of the other panelists have really touched on something that's really important, which is just creating workplaces that feel safe, and creating an inclusive workplace. In order to be inclusive, has to be a safe workplace. And the viticultural, the agricultural, and the winemaking and wine selling industries have often felt unsafe to a lot of communities for a very long time now. Whether you're female, whether you're queer, whether you're Black or Asian, or whether you're non-binary or non-gender conforming. And so these are all, we're at an important time for principals in firms and companies to really do an internal assessment of what does workplace safety look like. And it's not just OSHA safety. It's the feeling that someone can walk into your workplace and not worry about having an undignified experience. And so that's truly, for all of the firms and companies that are listening up to this panel today, I would encourage you to really make that workplace assessment. And it could be as simple and as mundane as looking at your payroll to see who's getting paid the most and who's getting paid the least. It's looking at who you had to lay off because of COVID, and whether or not you have the bandwidth to extend to them support while they are not on your payroll, that they're the first ones you consider to bring back when times are more flush. And that's internal pipelines and internal structures. I'm glad you asked about stakeholders, because each and every one of us right now in 2020 really faced some truly systemic challenges, from global warming and the wildfires to systemic racism and to political upheaval. The walls of your winery don't preclude you from involving yourself in making things better for people in your community. And so, we think about the impact of regressive immigration policies and the impact that that's had on how grape farmers and grape growers have sourced labor to pick the grapes and make it possible to make wine. And we think about the H1N1 program, and so
a panel discussing that earlier.
That's exactly right. And so these are all issues that impact your ability to create a safe workplace. And I would just encourage everyone listening to zoom out a little bit once you've zoomed in and realize that you have to address these issues both internally and externally. And, you know, if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together. And to your point, Teresa, you know, it really does take a lot of collaboration for us to really deal with the deep root causes of why the wine industry has felt unsafe for Black and brown people for so long.
Now, Dan, when I talked to you weeks ago, you said, first and foremost, listen. People often don't listen to each other, but that seems to be built into your culture at Gallo. And you also said that it's important to live your values, because if you don't, people will call BS on you. That the people sense when things are not authentic. There's a concern always when it comes to hiring non-traditional, or hiring for diversity, we'll call it. That's what I want to call it. That people are worried about appearing to have tokens, you know, to have a person around who's just there for show. And that would be a tremendous waste of manpower. Everyone who's hired needs to have a job, have a legitimate job, and be able to do it. And Carlton, you started talking about diversity being good for business. There've been studies, so many studies that show that when you have a homogenous group of people around a table trying to solve a problem, they're pretty much operating on the same bandwidth, and they're going to come up with the same solution. If you have if you have a broadly exciting, diverse group of people, they're each going to have a different bandwidth. They're going to look at it from different angles. They're going to be more innovative, and they're going to be more effective. You're going to make more money because you have smarter decisions. 2 years ago, some think tank in Massachusetts did a study that these diverse leadership groups in companies translated to 17% higher revenue. You know, if you don't want to do it because it makes you feel good, I don't care if it makes you feel good. It's good for your business. It's good for your community. But Dan, you talked about listening. What else?
Yeah.
What else can people do?
Definitely, to reiterate the point that you just made around business imperatives and better business success, I think there was also a McKinsey study looking at racial and ethnic diversity in companies, and they sort of said, hey, look, they ranked all the different companies in terms of their diversity, and they said for the top quartile of companies, those companies outperformed the bottom quartile by 33% in terms of financial outcomes. And I think that is an imperative for all of us, and especially us at Gallo, to create a really diverse and inclusive culture. One, as Vinny said, that makes people feel safe and always make people feel heard, no matter what their role is, no matter what the environment is, because everyone, as Vinny said, deserves to be working and contributing in a way that makes them feel dignified. And for us at Gallo, and specifically for us at Barefoot, that does include a lot of listening. We take a lot of time to make sure at Barefoot that we are listening to our consumers. We're interacting with them on a regular basis. You know, back in 2019, we launched an initiative really speaking to Black women. And so we started by going to different conferences like Summit 21, starting with the simple of, hey, let's have a glass of wine, let's have a glass of Barefoot, and let's talk about what you're facing, what's on your mind, what you're thinking about. And those were really rich conversations, and we got a lot of great feedback from people. And so we came back last year and we launched our We Stand For Her initiative. And I think I have a visual around that as well, if you don't mind pulling that one up. And that We Stand For initiative, it was based around the insight that, hey, a lot of these communities, a lot of these women in particular, were really thinking about entrepreneurship, and they were thinking about how they were struggling with being able to bring their own ideas and businesses to life, and how they needed a little bit of support in order to realize their dreams. And so in a celebration of those folks, and in a celebration of the beauty and the strength of Black women, we launched We Stand for Her. And we, as a part of this, partnered with the New Voices Foundation to deliver 6 grants to Black women entrepreneurs, which is very exciting for us, which got great results. We got 51 media mentions, tons of great social media coverage, but of course, most importantly, we got so much appreciation from the people that we supported. Those 6 businesses were so appreciative of that support. In fact, I'm happy to announce that just next week, we're going to bring this program back. We got hundreds of applications, a lot of worthy people we weren't able to help support. So we're going to be able to support even more Black entrepreneurs starting next month. And I encourage anyone here that if you know of any Black women entrepreneurs who are with fledgling businesses and are looking for support, please have them reach out to us so that they can apply for one of these grants. We're really excited about this, and I think it's all rooted, Dorothy, to your point around listening. And what a great way to listen. You know, we work in the wine industry. We were able to initiate a lot of those conversations over a simple glass of wine.
Now, when you first told me about We Stand, you said it was cool and a bit of slang. Now, being an older person than you, I Googled We Stand, and I was really dumbfounded to discover that it's We Stand. So I wondered what that meant, where it came from, and Urban Dictionary says it originated with Eminem.
Yeah, it was a fun. It was a fun learning. You know, as you talk and you listen, you also are able to sort of realize that, you know, you want to be able to use some of the nuance and some of the language that the communities that you're speaking to also use. And stand is definitely a word, as you probably saw, that carries a specific meaning. And we thought that actually that really resonated with that community and really represented what it is that we wanted to do to show our support.
Now, why just Black women in this one? Why not Black men?
Yeah, for this one, we found that, you know, it is in particular Black women who feel by the wine industry, the idea of we love wine. It doesn't feel like the wine industry loves us back. That's what we got from our listening and saying, oh my gosh, we have this community of people who I think, you know, Carlton and Teresa and Dottie, you've all sort of talked about this idea of, hey, look, are we really that welcoming? Are we, you know, seeing the people that look like us represented in the industry that we have? And what we got the feedback from particularly Black women was, we like the idea of wine, we like drinking wine, but we don't feel loved by wine. And so we said, oh my gosh, wow, we need to make sure that this community feels welcomed by the wine industry. And we are proud to say that Barefoot is a part of that charge to make sure that those communities feel welcomed.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. We have a question from, well, an announcement that Emily Porter wants me to make, that Sonoma State's Wine Business Scholarship window is open now with over $50K to support BIPOC students. Please help us spread the word among your communities. So we'll be posting this as well. So tourism and hospitality, you mentioned, I think, Tracy, you mentioned going to Black organizations' functions. How about hosting them where you are? Is there any thought to doing that, to bringing people to Napa and Sonoma?
Well, I think that's a topic that's going to be on discussion at the first committee meeting for Sonoma County Vintners Diversity Committee. I have a lot of ideas and initiatives, but you know, one of my ideas that I brought up when I first reached out to you, Dottie, when I was trying to put together panel discussions here locally in Sonoma County. This is before Sonoma County Vintners put together the committee. It was over the summer. So one of my ideas is to get a group of people together in Sonoma County, and working with Sonoma County Vintners is going to be brilliant because we can get a group of wineries together to host events locally, partnering with organizations and other, businesses that are focusing on bringing people of color to the wine industry. And so if we partner together, we should be able to, I think in the next couple of years, even bring people to the community, to our local community. But also what's really important, and I believe Gallo is doing this, which is to get ourselves out and show ourselves at events like Essence. So Dan, I guess I should let you talk about that part, but that's something that's a huge goal, is for wineries to be present at events where you have mostly people of color and show them that we're interested in getting to know them. We're interested in having them come to our community and to our individual wineries. I don't want to forget to, getting onto this subject, I don't want to forget to address the wine industry, the Sonoma State Wine Industry Scholars Program, because that's really important since you mentioned that, Dottie. We at Gary Farrell donated, we got lucky with our timing. We donated $10,000 to that scholarship program at Gary Farrell. And at the time it got doubled down. So it's $20,000, which will actually it'll sponsor 2 students for a full year through the Wine Industry Scholars Program, which is intended to help with financial assistance for first generation college students who have parents who've been involved in the wine industry or wine agriculture. So it's a really brilliant program.
Judy Jordan has a foundation that is also doing that. And Carlton, the Roots Fund you all had 2 interns working at wineries.
Yeah. So go ahead. I'm sorry. I'll listen to your question first. You talked about listening.
Oh.
Yeah.
No, how did you do that? How did you?
So we started
working.
Yeah. So we started the Roots Fund. I obviously we never want to discourage anyone from taking efforts that are going to drive more diversity and inclusion within any industry. But there was a lot of performative efforts that I just felt would never render any actual results. We saw the massive campaign of the big black squares on social media, and everyone went back to their life within 24 hours. So I'm a bit of a sort of a boots on the ground person, where I if I'm going to spend my time doing something, it should have an actual result. And what we realized was that we needed to be a little bit more honest about what was actually preventing a lot of these demographics from engaging with wine. One of them was that the same way that companies and industries reach out to other demographics, right? These offices, wineries, and tasting rooms are filled with employees, so they find them somewhere. Is that we needed to reach out to those communities the same way. Understanding that you actually had to do a little bit more work than normal, because those communities and demographics represent my family, my friends' families. They historically do not feel welcome to the wine industry. So you got to go out and make sure they feel welcome. So, and that's something we're still working with, like how to actually recruit, right? We're now trying to recruit kids from like high schools, right? Get them started early. Local colleges, pulling people from kitchens, saying, hey, look, there's a lot of parallels here. You can come over and do this. But immediately there was a very small amount of interest because we were a new organization. So those candidates that reached out, we really did everything we could. We financially supported them to cover their travel to move to Napa Valley. We found a few wineries and winemakers who were very, very open about, yes, I want these candidates. I want that kind of diversity in my cellar. And we were able to place them in some really incredible cellars, and they got really great experience. But then moreover, it was like, well, we need funds to do this. So I realized that I didn't have time to actually run the Roots Fund, and I had to be a realist about that. So I called my friend Akimi Dubose, who's now the executive director of the Roots Fund, who had worked in nonprofit consulting on Capitol Hill, worked with Nancy Pelosi on a lot of food programs. And she said, you know what, Carlton, this is a great program. Let's run with it. And she took over, and she's raised an enormous amount of money in a very short amount of time. When she meets with our teams, even the wineries that we own, I tell them they have to be very careful, because it's sort of like you have to zip up your pockets when you're in the meeting with Akimi. She'll take it all. But we love that, because she's raised hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars in about 6 months. And we've been able to offer something like 24 scholarships for college programs, for sommelier certification programs, sometimes even just to cover travel, because one thing we discount is to relocate, a candidate from New York City to move all the things to to Napa, where historically, they're not paid an enormous amount. Napa is a very expensive place. The community has not figured out a way to subsidize housing for workers, right? It's a big issue in the Napa Valley and most wine regions. So we help subsidize that. And then it's about job placement, because for me, it's great to engage these communities and to offer educational opportunities, but the rubber hits the road once they're actually employed. So we've tried to create a culture in the Napa Valley for people just being open to, bring these candidates in. They're very qualified for the work they're doing. Our two first candidates, Darwin Acosta and Darren Clark. Darren not only worked with Nico Cuevo, formerly of Costa Brown, who we have working with us, but he's now got accepted to do a full internship at Domaine Dujac. So in August, he'll be going to spend about 6 months with Jeremy at Domaine Dujac, and is also simultaneously getting to serve a wine certificate program from the UC Davis. 6 months ago, he was a line cook in North Carolina, sort of with a loss for what to do, very interested in wine. And that's the sort of difference we're trying to make, and to give like real life opportunities to these candidates and not giving them anything. Essentially saying, hey, there's the opportunity, now it's up to you to make it happen. So it's been incredible to see once there's actual programs set in that'll actually make a difference, that these people, they're ready. They're just sort of waiting for the industry to be accepted.
Now, how did you find him? You just put the word out? I mean, how
so social media is a very powerful tool, right? So we're just really sort of, blowing it up on social media and getting people to take interest. And he just direct messaged me. He sent me a message. He says, hey, Carlton, like, you don't know me, I don't know you. He's like, but I've always read about you, and what you guys are doing is incredible. He's like, I'd love your advice as to like, how to enter the wine production part of the business. He's like, I have no clue. That's part of the issue we find is, wine is this, it seems we market it as such a luxurious, unattainable product. But the problem is people don't understand its actual career path that you can take and how to actually start down the path, right? Like, we know how to become a lawyer or a doctor, right? Like, you just know this is the path. But there's no tool really that exists right now that's forward facing, that says, hey, look, if you want to be a viticulturist, or you want to, one day own your own farming company, this is how you do it. This is the path. You want to become a winemaker, this is sort of your path. And so we realized there was a big hurdle of like going to these communities and convincing like, this is a really lucrative career path that you could be very successful in, and just having them trust us in that. So we took Darren, we said, look, I called him back and I said, look, Darren, I said, you're a great line cook, it seems like. I looked at the place he was working, and I think there are a lot of parallels between working in kitchens, the discipline, the passion for hard work, the way you use your senses and so forth to be a great winemaker, and also reverence for great product, for agriculture, right? Like a great chef is. So, what I did was I said, look, what I'll do is I'll connect you with a couple winemakers that I know that are interested and very open to receiving candidates, and it's going to be up to you to get the job. I do not believe in giving anyone a job. We put them in the rooms with the hiring party, and it's up to them to get the job. And just like Darwin Acosta, Darwin came in, and same thing, he reached out to me and directly and say, hey, look, I'd like to do this. Can you give me some direction? And I said, look, we have a couple winemakers who are really open. I put him in direct contact with the family at Della Valle, and I stepped away. I had nothing to do with it. He had to interview with Maya Della Valle and Noco, which are very tough people to interview with, and he got the job. And now he's just been hired to work with Megan Zobek, to work with her both in the vineyard and in the cellar for the resurgence of the Burgess Cellars brand. And, again, 6 months ago, he was at the CIA as a culinary student with really no direction as to what he wanted to do. And really, it's about companies being open to just receiving these candidates. And, again, how do you find these candidates? Organizations like the Roots Fund, like Wine Unifier, like Black Wine Professionals. There's a number of them now. Just create relationships with them. We're starting a job listing board where you can just go in and add a listing. And candidates, even if they don't need a scholarship for us, they can at least go on and say, okay, these are companies that have taken that small extra effort to post their job on this website, saying that this is potentially an environment that could be very safe and comfortable for me to work in. It's a big statement. It costs nothing to put your job up.
That's great. That's wonderful. Phil Long, the president of the Association of African American Vintners, says that they spent a lot of time just telling Black kids, this is a viable career.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is something you can do.
Yeah, we struggle even with HBCUs, like trying to get them to understand I mean, these were directors and executive of colleges that drink wine, they're wine collectors, but there's no understanding of like as a career path. And you're right, and there is a massive hurdle with in the African American community with being in fields working. You know, my family still laughs at me like, you're out there doing what? You know, and I'm like, oh, I can call you right, I'm in a vineyard. Like, you know, the concept of that is very, very difficult. But it's something that we, you know, we're getting over and we'll get over and learn how to just deal with. And, you know, it's, you know, we'll put it this way, farming quality vineyards is not the same as our previous experience with agriculture. It's a very meticulous way of farming, and it takes a lot of education. And we're just sort of educating these communities as to the paths that you can take in the wine industry.
Southern Glacier, you know, is pouring money into Florida A&M, which has a viticulture program, but also social justice scholars. There are wine companies that are out there making connections to young Black people, and it's a wonderful thing. We have a question for Teresa. Someone wants to know how many Black people are on the Sonoma County Committee.
Well, we haven't had our first meeting yet, so I don't actually know how many are on the committee. I think of the people I know, I think there's one person right now, but remember, there aren't that many minorities in the wine business, and we're all representing wineries and vineyards. So for now, I actually think that it's a really small group of minority individuals like myself. Okay. So hopefully there'll be more in the future.
Okay. That reminds me of something Vinny said a couple of weeks ago when I talked to him, that if you're hiring through word of mouth referral and you're getting the same people, then maybe you need to be talking to more people. Vinny, I thought that was brilliant. I just wanted to shout out there for that.
That's very true. And I'll tell you, and I want to speak to that because and why it's important is what we realize is these are social barriers that are residual from Jim Crow and other sort of government issue ways of separating people in race and class. And it's a very important thing to talk about, and it shouldn't be dismissed, is, you know, we look at like social circles and how jobs are often filled. And it's usually like, hey, do you know someone that would be good for that position? Well, who are you asking that question to? It's typically someone who's in that same demographic. And most jobs are filled that way, even at the executive level in a lot of companies in the wine industry. And it will forever prevent you from having you know, an environment filled with people from different backgrounds, or creating opportunities for people who could be actually more qualified. And it's really important. And that's why we post every job. Initially, when I started building the company, I did it the same way, because that's the way I'd always been taught. It's like, okay, well, you know, call someone you trust, see if they know someone. And we were hiring so fast that we weren't even posting jobs. And then we realized that we were really dismissing the chance of bringing someone in that we didn't know that could be more qualified. So it's just something is making sure you actually post all your jobs, which is an epiphany to some people because they do hire through word of mouth. And I think it's really important to note that, because people can't apply for jobs they don't know exist.
That's a good point.
Yeah, can I add to that also?
Sure.
I think Carlton also mentioned HBCUs and recruiting there. And I think at Gala, we've definitely made a concerted effort. You know, we added 14 new HBCUs to our college recruiting last year. We had 13 virtual events at Howard alone. So we're absolutely making steps and growing in that space. And one other thing that we learned was that, you know, a lot of these candidates may not have some of that professional interview experience, you know, as Carlton was sort of alluding to, you know, you kind of, if you don't have that in your network, it may be harder. So one small thing that we did was we actually put up a lot of our interview resources on our careers website to make sure that, you know, the field was a little bit more level for those people who may not have that as experience, and so that they could be at the same level as a lot of other candidates who might have some of those tighter networks, have more of those connections, and know what to expect when walking into those professional interview environments. And that's helped us with HBCUs. We do a lot of recruiting with Latino business organizations at campuses across the country. Those are the small things that you can do to help yourself, and things that we learn, and we look forward to continuing to learn as we reach out to more diverse candidate pools.
Now, Dan, Gallo hasn't always had a great relationship with minority communities. You know, decades ago, there was fortified high alcohol stuff that was ruining, really hurtful in some communities, particularly Black communities. What happened that now you're doing all this really important work in these communities? What happened? Was there a point where you all just, well, you've only been there 7 years, but the company's been there forever, and it's powerful. There's this openness and sponsorship and support. Did something happen to make the company go, aha, that's what we should be doing?
You know, I can't speak to that. To your point, I'm not 100% sure of everything that's happened, but I am really excited and proud to say that we are taking a lot of steps forward in this journey. We know that, like, for all the work that we're doing now, it is a journey. It's not a destination. It's not, ta-da, we are done with diversity and inclusion. Now we can go on and look at other challenges. This is something that we're continuing to learn from, and I'm really honored and proud to be on a panel with all these other great people who have their own experiences. I'm learning a ton from you all. I'm going to take a lot of these insights back to Gallo so we can be better, so that the whole wine industry can hopefully benefit from this, because it is a really important topic, and it is really important for sort of the future of our industry that we're able to be successful in this area. So we're really excited. We're taking steps, but we know that we have a lot more steps that we want to take.
Well, I want to applaud these steps. They're big, and it is important that diversity in hiring and in marketing isn't something that people can just check off. I did that last year. You know, racial justice, inequality. Those are issues that require long distance runners.
So Dorothy, if I may.
Sure.
I think before there's justice, you need accountability. And, you know, we can't sweep under the rug the ways in which the wine industry and all of the adjacent industries have dismissed their responsibility in treating particularly vulnerable communities as less than whole. And so I think consumers are pretty savvy. They are going to spend their monies with brands that they feel are genuinely accountable for actions in the past that may have slighted their communities. So, and I think, you know, and I commend all of the talk here about sort of looking towards the future and bringing up individuals and investing in younger employees, but we have generations of farm workers, of wine professionals who have left the industry. Racism is expensive. It has cost this industry so much money in terms of lost talent, in terms of consumers who have gone to other brands and other beverages because they feel like the wine industry has been tone deaf and inconsiderate. And so I would really encourage, you know, as you build your companies to really understand what accountability looks like. It's not just go to HR. What are the processes for reconciling conflict among employees who claim that they are not being treated properly? And it's not enough to manage them out of your organization. You know, as a hiring manager or an executive, you need to understand that every departure, there's a seed of truth when someone leaves your company. And especially if they're, you know, exit interviews are really important to learn from and build better companies. When talent leaves your company at every level, from the executive all the way down to your contract work and your farmhands, it's really important to understand what shortcomings might teach you because diversity is not just an action. It's like water that permeates every part of your operations. So,
Hey, would you guys mind if I chimed in with a brief definition of what is diversity, what is equity, and what is inclusion for people to help them understand so that they can grasp and think of this for long term?
Great idea.
So I've been in communication with Leah Jones of Diversity in Wine and Spirits, now Diversity in Food and Beverage, and she's really educating me tremendously. So diversity focuses on the makeup of your workforce. It's the demographics such as gender, race, ethnicity, age, sexual orientation, disability, veteran status, just to name a few. Equity is promoting justice, impartiality, and fairness within procedures, processes, and distribution of resources by institutions or systems. Inclusion is a measure of culture that enables diversity to thrive, a culture in which diverse individuals are able to participate and fully in the decision-making processes and development opportunities. So really promoting, bringing in diverse individuals and getting them to management positions. Dottie, you mentioned tokenism earlier, but a term that I just learned from Leah is novelty employment. That's not something that any of us wants to get into. And that's different from tokenism, which is putting a face, somebody who's, say, a Latina or a Black woman or somebody who's gay on your staff just so that people can see that person. Novelty employment is hiring that person to do a specific job, like, for example, hiring a diverse individual to do the work of bringing diversity to your organization. It's not something that you want to do because that doesn't really give that individual an opportunity to become a manager or to become, a partial owner or something in the decision-making process. So all of this is really important. I'm learning so much, and I have so many tools that I'm trying to implement and share with other people as well, so they can start working with us on this.
But it's important to also acknowledge that there are minorities whose job is exactly that, diversity.
Correct.
Correct. And they're diversity consultants. So that's a real occupation. So feel free to hire help if you need that kind of assistance. There's a question here. How do we do a targeted hiring search without being accused of reverse discrimination?
What is reverse discrimination?
Excuse me?
What is reverse discrimination?
Well, that's a great question. Why I think the question is saying the person asking the question is wondering, if you specifically go out to hire a Black person, isn't a white person harmed by that? And it's illegal to hire anyone just because of their race, whether they're Black.
I don't think
it's illegal to do that. No one's talking about doing it.
Yeah, I think it would actually, frankly, and I'll be clear, is, I've made that very clear from even the beginning of the Roots Fund. I make it very clear in my company. I absolutely do not believe in hiring anyone because of their race, their sex, what they identify with. To me, I don't care. I'm a results-based person. I hire qualified people. If they have to be that, that's great. But what you should do is you should just widen your net as to where you recruit for positions. It's all I think that we should all be trying to do. It's the reason why you find these websites where you can put job boards. You go to HBCUs to try to recruit. Now you have your pool of all potential candidates. You should still hire the person who's the best for your company. I personally believe that there are as many people of color who are as qualified for positions as people who are not of color. And that's your decision as to between those candidates and what you value in your company. But it would be insulting to a person to hire them because of one part of their color, their gender, their sex. It would be demoralizing, and that's when you create tokenism. Tokenism is it starts with why you hired the person, and one of the easiest ways to prevent tokenism is to hire more than one. Right?
Yeah.
If you have a big company, you have 1,000 employees, and you have one Black person, one Latinx person, one Asian. Okay, yeah. So you're creating tokenism. So it's like you're telling them that you only found the one qualified Latinx person out of 1,000. Right? It's a little silly. So no one should ever be hired because of those reasons. but it's about widening the net when you're recruiting.
Right.
So Carlton, you have what? Widening your net to post jobs at the Roots Fund, Hughes Society, Black Wine Professionals. What other place? Historically Black colleges and universities that we keep talking about, HBCUs. What other? Do you have any other suggestions for people?
You know, the Roots, and I'll tell you, Akimi runs a lot of it. She even found like multiple organizations that work with recruiting for like Native American. I mean, she's like all over it, to be honest with you. So we're working with 2 organizations, and I do not know the names. If you guys can follow me at Carlton at lawrencewineestates.com, and I'll give you the resources. Akimi runs the Roots Fund, so I'm not going to act like I run it. I did like what most smart people do. You let a woman run a business, and it'll be far more thorough and organized. She found these 2 organizations. They really work with bringing Native American citizens into the wine industry, which I didn't know that existed, and I thought it was awesome. So we had a scholarship we issued on what was formerly known as Columbus Day, a scholarship to a Native American kid, which was awesome. So I mean, the organizations are out there. I mean, we Google everything else. It's pretty easy to find what you're looking for in the world today. So the idea that it's hard to find is ridiculous. You literally can find any piece of information in the world that you want on the internet. If you're looking to add diversity and to widen your net, it's very easy to find. Just use Google. And that's not to be dismissive, but it's just a ridiculous defense when people say that they can't find organizations that are, you know, supporting these demographics.
Or they're afraid to. I mean, that really, people.
Sure.
Really, don't go there. No, don't go there.
Can we talk about the fear? Dottie, can you add that to your agenda, your list of questions? The fear that people encounter when they're thinking about hiring people of color? We don't have to do it now, but I just want you to add it to your list.
You brought it up. What fear? How?
So there are barriers. There are barriers that non-people of color encounter when they're considering hiring people of color. Not only are they afraid of talking about diversity and inclusion, racism, they're also afraid to try and figure out where it's lame, but it's a reality. And it shouldn't be an excuse. This is why we're trying to offer tools, but the fear is there. People are afraid of getting into legal actions, you know, afraid of hiring the one Black person or the one Latino. So it's there. I'd like to, maybe if anybody else wants to chime in about this and how we can attack it. How do we eliminate this fear? I think we're starting it now by talking about it.
Well, Teresa, I think, sorry, Dorothy, you were going to say something.
Ahead. No, go ahead.
I think we all need to dispense with the idea that one hire is enough, right? Like that just because your statistics after you've made a diversity hire, quote unquote, changes. Most of these wineries are pretty small. I mean, well, most of the operations are pretty small in number, right? So hiring one individual that doesn't look like you can skew your numbers in a way. But I think we need to sort of step back from thinking that one hire is enough or 2 hires is enough, and really address the root cause, which is just like naming it. And again, speaking to accountability, like the daily accountability, like the language that's used in the winery, the language that's used in the vineyards, again, I can't stress this enough, like doing an audit of your payroll, and really at the end of the day, where the dollars go matters. You know, people can leave work, but what do they take with them besides their dignity? They take their paycheck. You know, what are people leaving after giving labor to your operations, giving labor to your endeavor? So.
Okay.
And Vinny, to your point, working on equity and inclusivity at each of our organizations is, I think, how we're going to get over the fear, right? Having the people, having the diverse team, making it a just, equal system, and teaching everybody on staff, people of color, non-people of color, teaching us how to talk to one another. We can't be afraid of talking about race. We can't be afraid to talk about diversity. We have to be able to engage and ask questions. Right now, I feel like people are afraid to ask people of color or any minority about their history, about their background, where they come from, because they're afraid of the repercussions. We have to eliminate this fear. And I think by talking like we are today and establishing committees like this Sonoma County Vintners Diversity Committee, I think it's so important for all of us to work together. I can't enforce that enough. I don't know how else to eliminate the fear.
We have to talk to each other. We have to let our guard down and trust that the person you're talking to is of goodwill and wants to really be truthful. There's this phenomenon called spotlighting. If you have one Black person on a staff, they don't want, unless they want to, most of them probably don't want to be the one person who you train all the spotlight on to say, okay, Dottie, explain to me what Black people think. Black people are not monolithic any more than anyone else is. But you have to trust the goodness, the intent, and applaud it. If people are willing to talk about this stuff, talk about it. There's learning to be had on both sides of the discussion. I just got this question from someone who says, I feel like most people are not looking for diversity hires. I live in wine country. I've been studying at Santa Rosa Junior College, getting associates in viticulture, wine service, and evaluation in marketing. I've worked 3 harvests and transferring to Sonoma State. I'm originally from Detroit. I'm here because I want to be in wine country, but I feel like most people aren't looking for diversity hires. You know, this is someone who's raising his or her hand, you know? And
it has been true.
Yeah. So one of the questions that we got is people want you to share your social media platforms and handles before this is over, because you all are going to be flooded with questions and hopefully some potential hires. O'Neill Vintners and Distillers, along with their brand partner, Charles Woodson, are offering 2 full ride scholarships for BIPOC students interested in wine careers, one at Sonoma State and one at Cal Poly. The wine and viticulture program at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo has a BIPOC scholarship very similar to the one at Sonoma State. So there are educational things happening. But we really do need to see hiring, because that changes the game altogether. I think when you have people in your employ, you can sell if you make efforts to sell, but actually bringing people to your place of work and making that work is where the rubber meets the road, I think.
And Dorothy, if I may, you know, all of these businesses are part of a larger community. It's in order for your employees to feel safe at work, they also have to feel safe in their communities. And you know, for Napa and Sonoma, these wineries have a disproportionately bigger impact on local policy, you know, and so if something doesn't feel right, like, you know, I would encourage entrepreneurs and principals at these businesses to really speak up in their community, because if one of the hardest things about retaining someone is it's not just the financial cost of living in Napa and Sonoma, it's the emotional cost of living in Napa and Sonoma. You know, community members who feel over policed in your community. You know, if you can't get to work safely, then you're not going to live in Napa or Sonoma. This is a real issue. And we see this with the farm working community, especially, you know, that during COVID, it's been so wild to just watch the response of you're an essential worker, but your essential needs are not our responsibility. So, you know, these are issues that sort of permeate and really demand that companies take leadership, not only in building safety for their employees in the workplace, but safety for their employees in their communities.
So if you have people of color in your employ, they need to feel comfortable coming to you and telling you things like that. They need to feel safe. So you need to create an environment, a work environment, where that kind of conversation is possible. So here's another question. Is the fear that the first step will be a misstep? So what's the one thing companies can do to dive in properly? If there's a fear that the first step will be a misstep.
There's definitely the fear there. You know, the internal conversations that we're having at the winery. It's not that we historically haven't wanted diversity. This is to address both questions. To avoid the fear, we are talking with people who know what they're doing, people who are educated in diversity and inclusion, like diversity in food and beverage. So talk to consultants, have the consultants come and do an assessment, have them look at your current makeup, your employee makeup, and see what you can do to take the right steps to avoid missteps. Anyone else here? Dan, how did you guys get about, what is your current diversity of employment at Gallo, and how did you guys get to that point?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's a lot of what Vinny said. It's about holding yourself accountable. It's not just about intent, because intent ends up as what Carlton said before. It's the black square in Instagram with, you know, okay, 24 hours later, then everything is back to normal. So what we just stood up last year is a diversity inclusion council that includes people across the organization, across all different levels, to set internal goals, internal priorities for ourselves, to drive those and to hold everybody accountable for them and make sure that we're making progress against those goals. So it is so much about creating, like, you know, again, doing that real formal assessment like you're talking about, Teresa, and then saying, okay, great, where do we want to be? And what are the specific steps to take to get there? And how are we going to hold each other accountable to it? Because I think it's very easy for us to be able to walk away from something like this, which can be very inspiring and educational, and to get caught up in the day-to-day, because we're all so busy. Our jobs can be so taxing, not even having to think about these kinds of things. And you could be lost in all of that very quickly. So I think for us, it's about creating a lot of intent, but also creating that accountability tied to it.
And what you do once you get your employees, like you guys have your ERGs, your resource groups. At a smaller place, like at Gary Farrell, we're going to need to consider human resources and what resources we have to offer people of color, you know, at a diverse organization or business.
Yeah, so I think, you know, what I always find is generally being kind and very honest with people is usually a really good policy. It's difficult when you're in a corporate environment, because I think the environment has taught us to be fairly cold and sterile in the way that we speak to people. But I think just being human and honest with people goes a very long way. And just being kind, right? Like the golden rule is incredibly important in having conversations with people. One thing that we found that, it was something I learned early on, was that part of creating a safe environment, you know, with having discussions, I wouldn't say complaints, but voicing concerns about company structures or policies that may make people uncomfortable, is having someone outside of the company as that person. So we hired an HR consultant company that we deal with for any of those concerns for our employees to go to. And that really changed, I think, the tone of a lot of things, because I've always found that I haven't worked for a lot of big companies, but I worked for one, and I always felt that having the department that I go to complain to being under the umbrella and managed by the people who I may be complaining about was a massive conflict of interest. And I found myself in that situation before, where I had a complaint or a concern about management. But guess what? When I make that complaint, that person must now go to that manager who they report to, you know, and you know, how do I win that or see any resolution? So we hired a company. We use HR Matrix. It's a small HR firm, and we pretty much just use them for just that. So if an employee has a concern about our company and what we're doing, or the way someone said something, or, you know, they go to that company now will call all of us in and say, hey, look, this is an issue that's been voiced. What are you all going to do about it? And that's really important. And you shouldn't come to that being defensive. If your actual goal is to make sure that your employees feel comfortable, then you should actually be embracing that sort of dialogue and being open to it. Because if you haven't done anything wrong and if your intentions aren't bad, you shouldn't be defensive about it. You should be very open to it. And, I saw a comment here, which is a big concern, is the idea of sort of cancel culture in saying the wrong thing. And I just think honesty and being kind goes a very long way. And if you're not saying anything malicious, I don't think you have a whole lot to be concerned about. And Vinny said something, that I think is really important. Its root is in vulnerability, which is acknowledging when you've done something wrong. Even as someone who's mixed race, I'm half Black, half Jewish, like I've gotten called out by people of color and things that I've done and I've said. And guess what? Like, not only did I apologize openly, and I learned from it, you move on. Like, it's vulnerability. It's like admitting when you've done something wrong, changing and moving on. And so you shouldn't have that fear. But if your intention is actually to make a great environment where people feel comfortable, which you should, then the fear, the defensiveness shouldn't be there. It just needs to become part of sort of like the fabric of how your company is run.
We're all in this together. And when one brand does well, you're not just helping your brand, you're helping the industry. You're helping your community. It's we just need to take a breath and be real and honest with each other. We're running out of time to lie and try to hide and duck and weave people. This is real time. This is real time. I saw that question about cancel culture too. That's a real phenomenon. But if your intentions are good, again, we have to give each other a break. We have to forgive ourselves, and we have to ask forgiveness of others. We're imperfect. Our country's not finished. There are challenges in every direction, but we have to meet them. And I believe that there are enough people of goodwill who still want to meet them, that it's worth the effort.
Dottie, one thing that I forgot to mention in the tools and resources for businesses to seek employment, there are also virtual job fairs. So there was Be the Change job fair, just as an example. And there's one coming up April, is it 21st or 22nd? It's in April. It's called Be the Change.
Yes, and that did great. The organization was Wonder Women paired with Leah's organization and a third one. And it was a virtual job fair, and so many jobs were offered. Wonder Women is now the Lift Connection Collective. They've rebranded, but they're doing stuff like that too. And Wine Unify as well has all kinds of corporate support. I want to ask you all, and even if it means rehashing what you've already said, what do you most want people to take away from this discussion? What I'm going to ask each one of you. What one thing do you most want people, when they leave this session, to think about? Teresa.
Most importantly, I want people to leave this discussion feeling empowered and unafraid, no fear, just rip the Band-Aid off, start having the conversation, start doing the research, start reaching out to people in your network so that you can work together to make the change. It's late. Dottie, you've been doing this for a very, very long time. And this is feeling new-ish after so many years, right?
Yep.
We need to just jump in the deep end.
Thank you. Dan?
Yeah, I think I'm going to bookend it because I think what Carlton said at the beginning was great. We talked a lot about like the business need and how, the survival of our industry is going to depend on this, but also the emotional part and the moral part of this, which is, I think that we are, at least I can speak for myself and probably many people I know are in this industry because of the power that a bottle of wine can serve for people coming together and having real, open, honest conversations and dialogues. And as Dowdy, you started off with, we're in a society today that's super polarized. We have people out on the streets on both sides who are feeling unheard, unwelcomed, and unloved. And I think that as an industry, we could take that as sort of seeing our role in that and saying, hey, we can help bring people together where a lot of forces in society are pulling us apart, then we can help be part of a positive change for society.
Okay. Vinny, we have 5 minutes left and we have Carlton.
You know, I think one thing that often rings for me every day is, you know, who's closest to harm. And I think, you know, as we all return back to our respective roles and our respective organizations, like if you solve it for those individuals who are most vulnerable, you solve it for everyone. So I think really that is the one takeaway I hope people will understand, that diversity, equity, and inclusion work is about creating safe space for the people who are most vulnerable.
Thank you. Carlton?
I would just say, you know, I think that overall it's worth your effort to do. I think often people think of they're already very busy, you know, like I already have employees as a whole. Why would I do this? It's worth your effort to do it. It will make your company better. It will make you better. And I think that should be equally as important.
Okay. The symposium wants the audience to know that your feedback is important. There's a survey. You can click on it in the session's description line or online at www.unifiedsymposium.org. I just want to leave you with the children are watching, you know, your families are watching. History has its eyes on us. Let's not screw this up. Okay, this is a moment in time when a lot is possible, and let's work really hard to see that it is possible and done to reconciliation and good health. Thank you all. Oh, anyone want to share their contact information? There are folks screaming for it online.
Should we type it in the chat or just shout it out?
You know, I'm such a tech idiot. What's the best way to do that? Dan, you're young. What do you think?
I think Charlie dropping it in the chat is great.
Okay.
As long as people can see it, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. This has been great. This has been wonderful. And I hope to stay in touch with you all.
Thank you for moderating.
Done? Yeah. Okay. I didn't make you. There we go. There we are. So I guess there's fear kept raising its head. Fear of doing something that we all agree is something that should be done. That's very distressing.
It's very real.
Yeah.
I'm encountering it more and more the more discussions I have with people, that the fear is real. Fear of misstepping, fear of saying the wrong thing to somebody. And that fear is like a giant wall that's been preventing us from having these discussions and preventing us from moving forward and making it seem like we don't want diversity in the wine industry, but we do. We really, really do. So I hope that these discussions will help us move forward.
I do too. And do more than discuss.
Yep. It starts here, but we have to do the work. We can't let people of color do all the work for us. This is why we need to have committees, communities working together.
Okay. Well, until next time. Take
Cool.
care. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you all
everybody.
so much.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Dorothy.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.